Before the new government knew that there would be a new government, and we had invited the minister to do the next introduction before he knew that he was minister. But a bit optimistically, so unfortunately the minister responsible for the energy side of this was not able to participate in today. But fortunately we have got Terje Kronen from the Energy Plus Secretariat to tell us a little bit about what they're doing and thinking, and hopefully also give us some hints about what the new government is thinking. It's not really, I don't know how broad his mandate is, but I can assure you you're among friends, so you're allowed to interpret a little bit. Thank you, Terje.
Well, firstly, I would like to apologize that political levels was not able to attend this seminar. I'm not going to be a stand-in. Actually, I'm not the right person. Some of you will know that I'm with the Minister of the Environment as a seconded to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So I'll concentrate on telling you a little bit about what we currently are doing to promote renewable energy in developing countries. As you may know, the 2013 budget is about 2 billion Norwegian kroner. That includes bilateral cooperation, multilateral cooperation, Energy Plus, and also what is channeled through Norfund. You may know that Norfund channels this money through SM Power. Statkraft has ownership of 60% of SM Power. But SM Power is not investing in the poorest countries. And as you can see, International Energy and Climate Initiative Energy Plus has about 10% of the total budget for the next 5 years. So the lion's share of the Norwegian efforts to promote renewable energy in developing countries come from clean energy for development and traditional upfront financing of projects. Actually, we have not had time yet to discuss with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and his state secretaries about the priorities and policy of the new government. But some indication we have got, and I'll go mention some points to you. Access to energy, and it should be as climate friendly as possible, is necessary for growth and development. New government states that. And of course, mobilization of private capital is important. We know that ODA is not sufficient to cover all investments needed. So we had in some way tried to attract private capital and mobilize also commercial investments. And we like to use ODA strategically to leverage private investments. The new government also highlighted the importance of achieving results and also the importance of quality in the development assistance. As you may know also, the Government Pension Fund globally will have a new program now for investments in sustainable companies and projects in 4 countries and emerging markets. That makes a new financial flow from possible from Norway to developing countries. So we're very curious to see how this will work in practice when it comes to energy in poor countries as well. There are certainly projects that need investments from funds like the Government Pension Fund. And also the new government says that I'd like to invite civil society and NGO to a close dialogue both as cooperating partners and also as watchdogs. I'd like to convey that message to you as well. Then I'll leave to the new government to do more details about this, and I turn to Energy Plus. Some of you know this initiative. It was launched 2 years ago in October 2011 by Ban Ki-moon and Jens Stoltenberg. And so far we have 55 international partners, organizations, donor countries, developing countries, and also civil society organizations. We have started so far to establish cooperation with Ethiopia, with Kenya, with Liberia and Bhutan. and we are very close to establish cooperation with Nepal as well. And very interesting in Nepal seems to have a cooperation between Denmark in lead, Norway, UNDP, Asian Development Bank, Germany, World Bank, and EU. And that's very interesting for Energy Plus. We should not be a bilateral Norwegian initiative. This is an international initiative that try to give some kind of concerted efforts. Very important to donor coordination in developing countries. I will mention some of the very important design principles of Energy Plus. The one is, as for Energy Plus, a sectoral approach. We like to support the efforts of the country itself to promote renewable energy and energy efficiency. And that's quite different from a project approach. Energy Plus will not be involved directly with projects. And the other design principle is payment by results. That means that we'll pay for results achieved in terms of increased access to energy services and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So that's quite different from that kind of traditional project financing. The third principle is to enable a better environment to leverage commercial investments. We like to use public funds for risk mitigation they get investments more attractive for investors, and there's also a need for capacity building, sector reforms, improved legislation, and etc. in many of the poor countries. We would like to support that as well. And as for Red Plus, we have phased introduction with 3 phases. And very important, instead of building up a new fund or something like that, we like to use existing programs, institutions like to cooperate very closely with other initiatives and mechanisms that are out there. One example now is that in Liberia, we are working very closely with the Scaling Up Renewable Energy Program, where with SREP and World Bank and African Bank as donors, and we will provide payment by results as a part of the total financing of implementing that program that will concentrate on off-grid solutions based on mini-grids, small hydropower, solar energy, and small biomass plants in rural areas in Liberia. And of course, we like to address social and environmental standards as well. These are the 3 phases. First of all, we like to see some kind of national energy climate strategies and action plan. As you may know, we like to support the efforts of the government, so they need some kind of planning that we like to support. Next phase is to support capacity building, institutions, legislations, sector reforms, etc. Just to make the government institutions more give them better competence, and also increase the number of people and staff there. In many poor countries there are a lack of staff, there are a lack of competence. And then it comes to the payment by results. We'll pay for the results, as I said, in terms of increased access to energy services and also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The next slide shows how the money will flow. Energy Plus, for example Norway, will provide funding to the national authorities based on those results achieved. That should be based on a system for measuring, reporting, and verification. The verification should be done independently. Then the payment will go to the authorities. In many countries, in Ethiopia for example, and also in Liberia, there will be a national fund that is set up to finance the next round of project and programs. That's the best. Then we know exactly that the payment by results will be channeled directly into financing of new programs and projects. Then the government will take the responsibility for developing some kind of instruments. You know, some of them, feed-in tariffs, credit lines, offtake guarantees, tax exemption auctions, etc. That will be the responsibility of the government. But also Energy Plus will provide kind of advices, take part in discussions about development of those kind of instruments. Then these instruments will create more projects, the aim is to really scale up projects. There are so many projects out there that we really need to scale up. So we like to see there's programs and projects that can be enabled by the new instruments that really gives kind of a transformational change into the government we are working with. Then there's a link between SE4All and Energy Plus. The reason why Ban Ki-moon went to Oslo in October 2011 was that he 3 weeks before that launched his initiative SE4All. And you may know the 3 goals: universal access to energy by 2030, doubling improvement in energy efficiency by 2030, and doubling the share of renewable energy by 2030. So you can see Energy Plus and SE4All share the same goals, but Energy Plus can be a vehicle to achieve those goals in developing countries. And the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon saw that very clearly, and they worked very closely with SE4All after that. As I mentioned, it's very important for us to cooperate very closely with other initiative programs, and this figure shows how this can work in practice. Other donors can then provide that kind of upfront financing, that could be loan or grants, and then Energy Plus can provide results-based payment by results. But as you see, the payment by results will come after 1 year, 2 years, so that will come when the results are delivered. That means that other donors will pay for the upfront cost for the first round of projects and programs, and then payment by results will come in and go into the total financing. And the beauty of this is that 2 possibilities here. One is that Energy Plus will make it possible to increase the ambitions of the government, or it could be possible for the other donors to reduce their contribution to the upfront investment, because payment by results will take over. And as you see from the previous slide, that will be kind of revolving. When programs and projects are delivering results, then it will go into a national fund that will again be used to finance the next round of programs that again will deliver results, go back to the government, and again can finance the next round. So that's a very good circle. But again, they have to achieve the results. So that's how it could work in practice. So we have now given a very short introduction to what we are doing. And as you can see from our principles, we feel that it fits very well into the signals from the new government. So hopefully this Energy Plus will survive and also will be expanded for the next years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Terje. And we also have a card for you as well, for your contribution to Cookstone, Nepal. Thank you for giving the overview. I think you will not be offended if we refer to that as the top-down approach to this. Good structures, good structural thinking, how we can release the funds at the level and the scale that's needed. Then we are very happy to have with us Ben Garside from the International Institute of Environment and Development, IIED, known as one of the world's most influential international development and environmental policy research organizations. Ben is a researcher from the Sustainable Market Group, where he's playing a key role in decentralized energy projects. This includes analytical work on energy models and building partner capacity and advocacy on new communication tools to turn research evidence into practice. Thank you for coming, and looking forward to hear a little bit of more about how we can build it up from the bottom to reach out for the big financial structure that Energy Plus is hopefully providing.
Thank you very much. First of all, I've been told that IID is a bit confusing because it should be EEID in Norwegian, is that right?
It is difficult.
Yes, so I'm a researcher in the Sustainable Markets Group Energy team. And what we do is work with a network of grassroots partners across Asia, Africa and Latin America to try to bring positive lesson learning and synthesize that up to the policy level. So what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit on what we consider energy access for poverty reduction and for sustainable development, some key principles on that. I'm going to talk about what are pro-poor energy delivery models and maybe a bit how they differ from business as usual. And then we've developed a conceptual approach to designing pro-poor energy delivery models that take into account some of the factors. And I'll be giving a couple of case study examples and then talking a little bit more about where we hope to go. So first of all, just on this is a briefing paper that we produced in the lead up to Rio Plus 20 and the sort of big launch of the Sustainable Energy for All initiative, and it was more of a sort of an advocacy document, but it came from the case study learning that we had, but it was directed towards Sustainable Energy for All, particularly around the three goals in Sustainable Energy for All, and access being one of them. So one of the messages was to prioritise the access, but with a focus on improving the lives of the poorest, which means not only delivering megawatts to the grid or issuing a certain number of cook stoves, but beginning to look at success in terms of what the energy itself is used for and looking at some of the outcomes and development benefits. And we strongly believe, and from all the evidence we've seen, that it's important to promote civil society participation at all levels, so that goes from the sort of practical project program level up to the national policy governance level, and to be supporting the effective use of local resources and to make that as sustainable as possible. So just a little bit of a definition, I won't read it all out, but this is within one of the framework publications that we have, a definition of what we consider an energy delivery model. And essentially it's the nuts and bolts, it's the types of input resources, the types of finance, the different stakeholders, the different management, ownership, governance models, the operation and maintenance that make up an energy service. So what are some of the factors on a pro-poor delivery model that we think are important, that possibly differentiate it from the sort of business as usual models? First of all, if we're trying to deliver energy services, particularly within rural areas, we're talking about decentralized. Now, with restricted resources, with restricted affordability of end users, we're trying to maximize the benefits, the success factors, if you like, that we have for a particular energy service. But what do we mean by success? First of all, from an end user perspective, there's often assumptions about what end users want to use energy for, and from whether it's a sort of a development organisation perspective or a business perspective, those assumed needs are not necessarily what people actually want. people's wants also vary across different timelines, so they have things that are much more shorter term that might not necessarily be donor priorities, but they're still demands and wants of end users. Things that would create a sense of demand within end user groups. Secondly, when we're looking at energy delivery models for the very poorest, there's often a need for quite a number of different stakeholders to be involved. Now, of course, each of these stakeholders will have their own different definitions of success, the incentives that will make them play in a particular delivery model. What we've called the social cultural context is one of the things that we think is the most important. From the evidence we've seen, the take-up and the sustainability of different energy services and the actual outcomes that you get are very much driven by things like local preferences. There was an earlier mention of wanting to have food that tastes proper, right? And that kind of preference really affecting whether people will use a particular type of cook stove or not. The expectations that they have, the different capacities and cohesion that communities have, the social capital, and the strength and perception of different institutions, whether it be government, local, national, or business. And then the enabling environment. So this is the sort of more formal stuff. The types of institutions, policy, the finance support, and the last point there being finance, sustainability and scaling. So what kind of design and payment options do we have? And again, that links back to the preferences systems. You see that some people will prefer to pay. There are sort of clever new technologies that let people pay for energy services via mobile phones. Work very well in some places. People are very skeptical about them in others. So it sort of demonstrates that the types of social cultural factors are important in whether it works. Another aspect within the finance is the role of subsidies. Now, affordability is sometimes a difficult thing to measure, but there's a lot of communities that are buying things within the informal market space as it is, whether it be kerosene or in Nigeria we see a lot of, I work a lot in Nigeria and we see a lot of cases of dodgy diesel, petrol that's been sort of refined in the backs of the bush. So they're already paying for those types of things. So affordability in many cases is there, but there's also a role for subsidies. So how do we target those? So with that kind of core section there, which is essentially the delivery model itself, there are a lot of things around that that are needed to support the service working. And what we've done is just to put that into a sort of simpler framework. We have there in the center the energy delivery model. At the bottom we have the supporting enabling environment, and then because we feel that it's quite important, it's at the top, the social cultural context, those factors that the enabling environment the delivery model itself has to live and operate within. We've also added a little box there called additional support services, and I'll discuss those a little bit later on, but the idea there is that sometimes that within the mainstream, for example, the mainstream enabling environment, there isn't an access to finance for a particular type of energy service. There's a need to create it. So those are the sort of services that may be needed to be added in, or capacity building for communities, etc., to be able to support the delivery model. So I'm just going to talk about a number of examples. I've got 3 different case studies. this first one is a cross-country study from across Nepal, Kenya and Peru, and it's looking at micro hydro and mini hydro. And the analytical framework that this author used looked at technical, economic, social, environmental and institutional dimensions. So it was quite an interesting study because I think many energy projects primarily are driven from a technical and then secondarily an economic perspective and don't bring really in those other dimensions. A lot of projects are I think, driven by a desire we all have for renewable energy, but the technology and the interesting nature of it and the way that it's evolving so rapidly often becomes an overbearing focus. So some of the things that were learnt in this study, first of all, it was very important where the energy services that were analysed were seen to have positive outcomes, for there to be a sense, a feeling of responsibility by the end users for the energy system. So in this case, electricity generated from microhydro. Now this responsibility, in the sort of terminology we use is ownership. Now ownership doesn't necessarily mean legal ownership, although it could, but having a feeling of ownership and buy-in, which can come from a variety of factors, whether it be paying for the service, whether it be contributing to the building of it through what's known as sweat equity, so putting in free time and labour as part of the process, or whether it be involved in the governance, so deciding, for example, the tariff structures, who manages it and how. And the systems that worked better tailored the model itself and how it worked in the governance structure in particular to local needs. Now, one example here was with the sort of ownership model in Nepal. There's a long history of cooperatives within the country, and on paper, if you look at the sort of cost models of cooperatives, they're cheaper than sort of private sector type models. And in Nepal, they worked particularly well because there was a history of that and quite a lot of community cohesion. In Peru and in Kenya, the private enterprise models worked a lot better. So it's just some of the learning of how these things need to be tailored for particular contexts. Okay. The fourth point there, the systems that work well also looked, this is sort of more of a technical point, but they looked at the demand and tried to estimate that so that they weren't delivering something that was working today but tomorrow would be struggling. The second example is in Nigeria. Now we have a number of different projects working here. One of the projects is actually using flared gas, associated gas from oil pockets, to generate power with a community utility company model. And a number of the others are renewables projects. But we've recognised that there's a role here for, in very oil-laden Nigeria, for the oil and gas companies to play, whether it be directly in the case of the gas model or indirectly in terms of social investment into renewables projects for provision of domestic energy services. So some of the challenges that we've seen here in terms of coming back to the social cultural aspects, one of the projects that we have in a community in the Niger Delta, there was a sort of an NGO involved looking at local needs, beginning to establish the priorities that people had, and one of the top priorities was clean water. So within that particular community, there were 3 or 4 water pump projects that weren't working, and were assessed to be beyond repair. Now, there's a lack of culture, a cultural awareness in Nigeria of the importance of the operation and maintenance side, and the community was aware of this. So with a sort of participatory process, the NGO built up water committees, discussed tariffs, it's discussed the importance of ongoing operation and maintenance. The project was due to be part of a sort of a community managed solution, and the project was built, and the community came along on the first day of the opening, and they were told to bring their buckets and bring their money because there was an agreed tariff structure. And so they came with their buckets and they didn't come with any money. So the NGO said, okay, well, you haven't got your money, what's going on? They said, well, you know, it's the rainy season. We can kind of collect rainwater anyway, so, but you know, turn it on anyway. So the NGO was quite strong after this long engagement process and said, no, okay, let's wait for the dry season. The dry season, there were other excuses, and this is an ongoing issue with that particular community. Now, in a neighbouring community, a different model was tried. The water was also a priority identified by this community, but it was a social enterprise model where the borehole was put into a particular individual compound, and the individual was required to put in some of his own capital as an investment, and he was required to maintain it according to a certain schedule. People came with their buckets and they came with their money and they happily paid. So it shows you that within particular different environments, that particular model for the social enterprise worked quite well compared to the community model within Nigeria, but elsewhere it could be the other way around. At the sort of wider governance level, just to sort of say that community involvement is not only needed, and the sort of discussion process not only needed with particular projects and programs, but at the big project level, when you're talking about grid access, in Nigeria there's a huge supply-demand problem, and you have people who are connected to the grid paying fixed tariffs because there are no meters, but yet they see their service is only working 2 days in a week or 1 day in a month in some cases. And so there's a big problem in terms of willingness to pay for services, and there's a lack of understanding in some cases of the technical aspects that are required to resolve that. On the other side of the coin, the government has just gone through with a privatisation programme of the electricity sector, and tariffs are due to double or triple. So you can see that involving civil society in that conversation is extremely important in terms of being on the same page and actively managing the demand side whilst building supply. The third project is in South Africa, and this project is called Choices, and the idea here is to be building community capacities to make their own informed choices on what types of energy services they want to have, and on the other side to be building investor awareness of how they can go about engaging with communities and acting as a bit of a broker in bringing these things together. And this project in the Eastern Cape is sort of had a 1 year in, and it's had a number of different workshops that have achieved this, the starting points of the community decision-making process, which is focused around problem solving. So it's not just energy, it's energy for what, and looking at the wider problems that the community has and what other factors outside of energy services are needed as pieces of the puzzle in order to solve that problem. And then to be looking at potential investment options to be able to do that. So that helps to bridge across the different levels of household provision, community service type provision, and making decisions on whether energy services should be individual within houses, for example, through solar home systems, or on a sort of mini-grid level, and the productive side, and bringing that in, and not treating those three as entirely separate issues. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the approach that we've developed along with CAFOD, and we've partnered with CAFOD recently to look at, okay, so you have this energy delivery model framework, you have a number of case studies, you've sort of identified some of the things that look important within the enabling environment, the social cultural context that look like they need more study. How would you go about practically designing an energy delivery model that was optimized for particular community needs? So there's a three-phased approach to this. First of all, I'll just talk about some of the principles in the approach. The starting point is the needs of the end users, and therefore we say it's demand-led, and that is bringing in the wider needs. There's a focus on energy, but it's looking at wider needs. The idea is that this approach is participatory, so it's bringing in different stakeholders to discuss problems and come up with collective solutions. And it aims to more systematically examine not only the financial sustainability, but the social and environmental sustainability as well. It's a guideline process, so what we have here are essentially some examples, and we hope that when this is implemented in the field, which is the next stage, that it will be adapted to particular example context. And of course, it doesn't replace the experience of different NGO practitioners and small business practitioners that have been working in this field for many years. And as part of that, it builds on existing tools, and we encourage the integration of local techniques. So just to go through the three stages, the first stage is basically setting the scene, and it's probably the most important. It's really identifying the demand. The way that we see this is that there's usually an entry point, a set of objectives that somebody has, whether it be a business who's interested in renewable energy technology, or a government which has a particular policy focus on productive use of energy. There's going to be some sort of entry point where some actor is very keen to get involved in energy service provision. Taking that, we see that the first important thing to do is to be doing a wider mapping of potential stakeholders that could be involved. And this includes people outside directly of the energy sphere. So it might include NGOs that work with those communities for various different reasons, if it has a particular geographic focus, the local municipality, etc. And then working collectively on a process which goes through identifying those sort of problem statement needs and looking within that whether there's a particular gap where an energy service could be a piece of the puzzle to the answer. So from that process, a number of ideas will come out, a number of potential energy service provision activities. The second phase is to really kind of look at those ideas and say, well, okay, what would it look like to build an energy service that would be able to fulfill that particular idea, and how would that energy service really look if we really consider the social cultural context, the enabling environment that it has to sit in. So as a tool and part of that, and the third phase is the actual designing of the model, and then going on to look at implementation and how that would be effectively managed, monitored and evaluated. So what we've done as part of this is developed a couple of tools to assist with the process of building the delivery model and evaluating whether it's really going to do what we hope it's going to do. This particular tool, we've called it the Delivery Model Canvas, is actually developed from a very commonly used business tool by a guy called Osterwalder, the Osterwalder Business Model Canvas. In the center of the canvas is a value proposition. What we've done is we've adapted this to be looking to take into consideration that this isn't just one business. It's going to be many different stakeholders. There has to be value seen for all of those. There also has to be, if we're talking about pro-poor business models, social and environmental positive outcomes. So if you look at the middle, we've got the value proposition which asks around the problem statement. It's effectively an in-depth theory of change which looks which has an outcome focus, looks at the problem statement and how it fits with the other pieces of the puzzle that I mentioned. At the bottom we have accounting, so that's what are the costs, what are the revenues, because we have to make this sustainable over the long term, but also within the middle there, what are the social benefits and the environmental benefits so that we can account for those. On the right, we sort of break apart the end users into different segments, looking at the end delivery channels, and the questions that you see up there that are in different colours are aspects outside of the delivery model itself that we really need to consider. So when we're looking at delivery model channels, what really works well for that context, and we have a number of different questions that try to sort of get inside that. And then finally on the left, the different stakeholders, the other stakeholders that are going to be part of that, including donors, for example, if there's a finance or a need for a subsidy. This is just a visual way of mapping some of those things out, and you'll see that this is essentially from that earlier model with the delivery model, the enabling environment, the social cultural context. This is filled out in more detail, so this is a way of people work, a tool that we hope will be useful as people work together to see, well, are we covering all the bases? Have we analysed all of the angles? And again, this is intended to be an example that would be adapted by particular communities of practice. So what we hope to do with this tool is to be developing it further, to be looking at how it would be adapted in the field, and more importantly, if we're talking about scale, and we believe that scale doesn't come with a blueprint, how this process can contribute to scale, so that the scale means adapting to context with efficiency. I mean, we have to be considering that, but that maximises those development benefits for each particular context. And as part of that, we hope to be building on the body of evidence and the measurement and the indicators between energy service delivery and livelihood impacts. In parallel with this, we have a couple of other streams of work. One of them looks particularly at finance and what that kind of investment model would look like to channel money into bottom-up processes, and also the literacy and governance side. So I mentioned earlier, what would that look like at project level, but what would it also look like at national level? And in Nigeria, we're working on a civil society platform that engages with the national policy in the sustainable energy for all process. And finally, just to be continuing to engage with that sustainable energy for all process, be looking at the indicator frameworks they have and be pushing those beyond just numbers of megawatts on the grid or lights on. Just to say, there's a number of publications, and I do have copies of those first two, and one on investment, and if anybody wants hard copies, I have those here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivan, for really taking us into the practicalities of it and the realities on the ground that we have to deal with. And not least also of presenting a model for how to address it. I think it'd be very interesting to follow you further and see how we can test out and what the result be for using this model to bring it up to scale. So thank you very much. Oh yeah, there's a clean cocktail for you too. Not for you, but your colleagues in Nepal.
Okay.
So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So we have seen the top-down approach through the structure and thinking of the Energy Plus initiative, and then we've gotten from Ben some of the sort of realities of the bottom-up approach. In between there, somewhere, someone needs to generate or push this further to generate a drive and accelerate the implementation. And possibly that will be a role for the business segment. We are fortunate to have with us two presenters to take that perspective, Ola Sætre and Christian Tangen. It seems like you are preparing to talk first, Christian. Then that's, I guess that's all right. Yeah, okay. Christian is well known to many for as being one of the founding fathers of Point Carbon, and sort of being at the early stage of the industry of trading in carbon and developing the research and advisory department of Point Carbon. He's here today as co-founder of another initiative, another in the business, Differ, whose business idea is to help scale up small-scale carbon reduction technologies in developing countries, and I think that's what this is all about. So, welcome, Christian. Sometimes these modern technology has their challenges and some capacity.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name is Christian Tangen. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for inviting me here. I was planning to talk a bit about the differ, say who we are and what we're doing, and then two of the businesses we are developing, solar home systems in Kenya and clean cook stoves, which also are in Africa and in Indonesia. So let's just start with the differ. It's a company that was started by, today we're 8 people working there. And what we try to do is to identify a good business idea of small scale project that reduce carbon emissions, which we then will help to scale up. We also do some advisory and analysis. And our main focus is on renewables, renewable energy and energy efficiency, and mostly in Africa and Asia. So these are the people that are currently working in Differ. It's Erik Salvar, who started REC, Renewable Energy Corporation. It's me, and it's Jørgen Duen, who was one of the founders of Wind Carbon. And then the rest of the team has largely been working in Wind Carbon. So it's a lot of people with a strong academic background, strong analytical background, and now working trying to develop business and advisory services. So, of course, a lot of the things we're doing in the short term to get some money in is to do advisory and analysis. And we do some advisory for private companies and for government organizations. We also attract quite a lot of grants to support the business development we're doing. And we have a public research series where we publish reports on our website. So that was Differ in a very few minutes. Then I'm going to the solar home system. Well, as you know, Erik Salvar, he started REC, so he has a long interest in the solar space, to put it that way. And he also sees that there is a big business opportunity for providing solar home systems for the people in developing countries. And in Africa, you have 80% of the people have a mobile phone. So they need electricity, and they can pay. Most of them have access to mobile money, which means they can pay by the mobile phone. Only 40% have access to electricity, and largely that is because the transmission network is very poorly established and it's not reaching that many people. But they have, many of them have some money. They have the mobile phone they need to charge, they need some lights so they can read, and they like to have TV and they like to have PC, and as they are developing, they will have money for that. But they don't have the electricity for it, and they don't have the financing for it. So that is what we provide. We have established a company called Bright Light, which is then selling this kind of solar home systems, which are the solar panels, batteries, and the lamps and the mobile chargers. So this is the package we provide, and we sell it on a credit basis. It means that they will pay month by month, and they pay by mobile money. So finally they get some power for charging their cell phone, so they can pay for it as well. And they don't have to walk the 2 to 3 kilometers to the local kiosk where they earlier had to charge their mobile phone. Currently we are doing a pilot phase in Masai Mara in Kenya, and we're working together with Base Camp Explorer, which is maybe familiar to some. So far we signed up close to 200 people buying the system, and of course there's a lot of work actually to get to that stage. You need to import the panels, the equipment. You need to get the payment system to work. You need to have the people on the ground that can sign up the people on the contracts, and you need a way to supply the panels locally. So it's a lot of work, even though the numbers are not that large yet. getting there is a lot of work. And of course, as we've proven now that this concept works, we are looking to expand it further. In Kenya in the first place, and then to other countries in Africa later. So we think that there are quite a number of companies like Fra Litteraturhuset working in Africa. We think we have some competitive advantages that will help to make us successful. We're currently building up a web-based communication tool that is enabling us to cooperate or communicate with our partners, local partners. We have a better cost performance than the competitors, providing the same kind of system. The system we provide will be able to give power to TV and PC, which most other systems don't do. And we have the possibility to use a cell phone to switch on and off the system if they don't pay for it. And if they don't pay for it, we of course will collect the system and take it home, so they wouldn't have access to the electricity. And we have the quality of what we provide is of course quite high compared to the competitors. Both the battery lives and the LEDs lamps we're using have a very long durability. So this is the business model. It works, and as we are growing, we will then see how quickly we will grow, and that will decide on how much money we want to put in going further. The other business model we are involved in is production and distribution of clean cookstoves. And the background for this business, I think most of you know, some 2.7 billion people are currently making the food over 3-stone fire. So there's a lot of deforestation coming out of that, and there's also lead to very poor indoor air quality, causing asthma and a lot of other cancer and so on. So more people dying from bad indoor air quality than of AIDS and malaria combined here. Most of them women and children, which of course are closer to the kitchen. So what we have been doing is to develop what we call a kludd top lift updraft clean cookstove. And so far we sold 15,000 of it in Indonesia. And we're then looking to sell it also to other countries. This stove cost approximately half of the cost of other stoves which are on the market. And as you can see, we have conducted a number of tests and compared it to other stoves, and it has a much higher score when it comes to efficiency, to local pollution, and so on. So what we're looking for here is to scale it up and distribute it widely, and of course try to sell it in a high quantity. Currently we have the headquarters in Oslo, and then we have established companies in Senegal and Zambia, and we're about to establish a company in Indonesia. It normally takes 6 months to establish a company in Indonesia. Things takes time, but we have a local partners, and we do sell it there already. We're working with very strong local partners in all these countries. You can't do this kind of things if you don't have a local partner. You can't recruit the people directly without having a local partner. So we have well-established and very well-functioning partners. In most of the countries, or in Zambia and Senegal at least, we will also sell sustainable harvested wood chips, which is then a residue from natural parks. While the prime manufacturing is then the production company which are producing the stoves. The financing is provided mostly by Differ directly, the owners of Differ, but we also have grants from Grand Challenge and from Conservation International and so on. So there's not the distribution of stoves is quite hot in the grant community, to put it that way. So it's not that difficult to get funding for the activities. But of course we have the advantage that we have funding from our mother company, and which can match the funding from the grants. And yeah, we just got the first container in Senegal. It's still waiting in the port, so it'll take another week before it go through, hopefully. In Zambia, we'll take that in a bit later, later this year. And in Indonesia, we are looking to scale up the sales we already have. But we're establishing a distribution company now in North Sumatra. And we're probably going to build a factory for producing the stoves in Africa later next year. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Since we have a bit of time, maybe I can ask just one question before you do the podium. And when you say, or you're selling the cook stove for $30, but you're also providing equity from your own company and grants. What's the additional funding for, and to what extent is the price of the cook stove a sustainable, or contribute to a sustainable business model in itself?
Yeah, it's $30. It's sustainable. There you have sufficient margin on the production, and you have sufficient margin in all the parts of the value chain, basically. Of course, you need the equity and the grants to initiate it and to set up the organization before the sales are big enough. But the price is sufficient to make it sustainable. So this is a sustainable business without any carbon financing or any subsidies.
Or will not be dependent on grants in the long run?
No. Yeah, this is just for. But it's very nice to have some grants to take down the initial risk. Otherwise, it's a high risk business. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw a similar presentation from a company called BioLite. I'm not sure if you've heard of them.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, they have those cook stoves that harvest the heat and generate electricity as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fairly new technology, but I found it very interesting because it was tackling the same issues of health, within the closed environment and better air quality, using less wood material to burn because of the intake of oxygen. And then at the same time, it was generating electricity. I just wanted to know if you heard of this technology and if you could, probably the investment costs are going to be much higher than $30 for this technology, but is maybe something you would consider, as another technology, for example.
Yeah, or as a competitor, but yeah.
Yeah.
I think in general what we're looking for is a very simple. It's extremely simple, so that's why it's so cheap also. And of course, it's nice. Some stoves have fans to have more air coming in. There are a lot of fancy ways of making stoves, and some are made out of galvanized steel and is made in Germany. But you can't do that for $30. You have to use almost scrap metal, and you have to use local labor. And I think and that's the whole point. You have at $30, you have a certain amount of demand for the product. If you go to 50, there's not much demand. So there's a 20 to 30. There's a limit to that's the range where the local population are able and willing to buy it. Of course, for the local, it's also important that at this price they save a lot of money, because many of them will either buy wood or they will buy charcoal. But this stove I will actually we have a payback in less than 6 months, 3 to 6 months.
Okay, one final question, and then we'll take more questions at the end for everyone.
Well, actually, I have two, but they're very short. I was wondering about do you have any systems for operation and maintenance? You said that you have very high quality and long durability of your products, but do you have anyone who can go out and help if something doesn't work?
Yeah. For the solar home systems, they are paying only if the system works. So there you need to have people to look after the systems. We have some what we call the solar grandmothers, or also local expertise that will look after the systems. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. And largely what they're doing is changing the battery water, because if you're not using purified water for that, the batteries will go corrupt quite quickly. But there's no big deal doing it, just to be sure that you actually are doing it the right way, and you change it and you fill it. And if something breaks down, you need someone to repair it and put out a new system. Do you have one more?
Yes, one more very short. I was wondering about, we heard Ben before talking about the socio-cultural context and how people might not want to use these kinds of services because it changes the way that food tastes and things like that. Do you have any experiences of that in your market? Is it hard to have a market for these services?
This is, I mean, the way this stove operates is fairly close to what a freeze-on fire will look like, or the same way of using it. So it's not that different. You can also say that as the combustion is higher, there's usually a blue flame, and the blue flame is something that is associated with LPG, particularly in Senegal, and as such it's a good association, which means that it becomes an aspirational product. But I think this product is so similar to what you do are used to do, so it's not that difficult to adapt to the local. We do change the type of burning chamber and a bit on the design depending on what kind of wood they are using. If they're using chips or sticks or whatever.
Thank you, Christian. More cookstoves, they could have been your own, but thanks for providing a proper real case example. Final speaker today is Ole Sætre. He has a lot of experience in building companies, hardcore business experience from Apotek 1 and Entra Industries, and now the managing director of Safi International. Safi's goal is large-scale replacement of coal and firewood-based cooking with cookstoves powered by sustainable bioethanol. So interesting. Will be interesting to hear from someone used to big-scale industry.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here this far, those of you who are left. Det selveste rosinen I pølsa som kommer nå, da, vet du. I would like to address a new phrase today, pro-poor energy delivery models. That's what you're going to see in practice here now. That's what we have developed, taking your theories one step further. Also, I'd like to address Energy Plus. You're asking for suitable large-scale projects. Here's also one coming up now. Let's see. This is Africa, beautiful country with a lot of beautiful nature and very many good aspects, but it has a great deal of challenges as well. I always get a little bit sad when we're together with the NGOs because they always present the bad picture of Africa. But also that's of course how it is to a great extent. In Africa, we are working mainly in 4 countries: Ethiopia, Kenya, Mozambique and Madagascar. In these countries, 88% of the population has no electricity. There's more than 150 million people dependent on firewood and charcoal to cook a meal. That's a lot of people. And the very same people have only $2 per day to survival. And we have a deforestation rate of 80 to 90% in average in this country. So we were looking at a very, very serious situation. You know, let's see how this works. Collecting firewood takes a lot of time. Deforestation doesn't look very good. It's a huge, challenging problem. And toxic emissions create on a worldwide basis, according to the latest figures from WHO, leads to 4 million deaths annually among women and children. A really, really serious situation. Is there a solution? Is there any hope? We think so. We have just had a presentation from DIFFER presenting the standard solution to this problem, which is improved cook stoves. We would not call it a clean cook stove because it's still emitting smoke. According to the latest research, it's like smoking 5 cigarettes instead of 20. You have not gotten rid of the problem. It's helping, but it's not solving the challenges in a sustainable way, in our opinion, and in WHO's opinion. Bioethanol stoves. There's been done a lot of research. The World Bank on Madagascar, together with Practical Action, has been doing research on bioethanol stoves for the last 10 years. Several pilot projects has been run in Ethiopia, Kenya, Madagascar, and the first commercial operations are up and running in Mozambique today. What does the bioethanol stove? First of all, it works very much like an LPG stove. It's the functionality of it. It saves the forest totally from being chopped up for that purpose. We know that a great deal of the forest is being used for charcoal. It gives a totally clean indoor environment with improved health conditions, with no toxic emissions. Woman saves 2.5 hours per day in cooking and cleaning. That's not on collecting the wood, that's on just the cooking and the cleaning. It's very efficient, it works like an LPG stove, and the woman's time are freed up to more alternative use of the time. And it creates local jobs with distribution and farming and the production of the ethanol. It does. And this is Dometic, which is a standard cooking solution today that has been used in all the pilot projects. It's a very good stove. It looks okay and it works okay, but we don't think it looks good enough and we don't think it works well enough. So we have developed this Safi cooker, which is the Safi ethanol cooker, that we are setting up production of right now. It's nice, it's clean, it's efficient, affordable stove for the market. But as you spoke about, it's not enough with a stove. We need a system to implement it. So what we didn't start making the stove. We started to make the system around it. Just recently, the 4 last months, we have developed the stove. We have a few companies in our group. We have a company called Green Development. They have developed a POA. That's a program of activities under the Kyoto Protocol, registered in 20 countries for ethanol stoves, biogas stoves and water filters. So for every stove in operation here, we are getting carbon funding. We have established the production of the stove, and we are establishing the distribution of ethanol on the ground. We're saying that every household in Africa wants an e-cooker. I've not met one person yet that doesn't want this stove after trying it. But there is a challenge. We have approximately a production cost of $50 US. We subsidize it by 30 and then we sell it to the family for 20. We need to create financial systems around the stove to get it out in a large scale. We could go out with this stove to the upper market in Nairobi and sell well, but what we are doing, we are targeting the poor, and therefore creating financial solutions supporting the price of the stove. That includes carbon credit funding. It includes microfinance institutions. It includes financial support from public institutions. And it includes financial support from companies and private donors. altogether many ways. But the really important thing here is the cost and of the fuel. And if you look at Africa today, the single largest consumer market is charcoal. And the price of charcoal is now so high that it equals or is higher than the price of bioethanol. So there is a sustainability. They spend $1 or more on charcoal every day in and around the cities. And the price of bioethanol is lower than that. So we see that there is a sustainability in creating a clean alternative that's actually profitable. Poor families with the stove in hand will be able to afford a shift over to bioethanol. And then we are looking at the distribution system. We have established a franchise model because we think it's difficult to go in, build a huge westernized approach on the ground in Africa, where we have to buy all the expensive equipment and do everything our way. We want it done the African way. So we are working together with local businessmen and women to set up distributions. Secondly, we are rolling it out through projects. We create a project. We don't go to a store and ask if they want to sell our stove. No, we are working, for instance, together with in Kibera. That's the largest slum in Kenya and maybe even in Africa. Where we work together with a local NGO called Humande Trust. They have 90 community centers run by women in Kibera. All those 90 centers will distribute ethanol and the stoves. They provide the training. There's already stoves around now, building awareness and preparing for the large-scale rollout. And they pay between $1 and $2 every day for the charcoal. So the switch will be quite easy, they're just waiting really. But we want this, also to make it sustainable, we want the franchisee to sort of follow up the operation, be responsible for local agents selling ethanol on the ground. The franchisee will have Safi kiosks around. In Kibera there will be women groups running the Safi kiosk. We have established a cooperation with Mumias, the largest sugar and ethanol producer in Kenya. There the youth groups will be running the kiosks. And we have established a cooperation with the UNHCR in the refugee camps in Ethiopia. There refugees will be running the Safi kiosks. But everyone is making a living. We are creating workplaces on the ground. We are creating small businesses with the franchisees. And to a great extent, following the model of the phone companies. There is one big success factor with the phone companies, and that's that everyone is making money on it. And here we will have everyone making they can make a living out of it. And a very important part of this project thinking is that we are using and cooperating with the existing infrastructure on the ground. There are so many NGOs, good NGOs in Africa, with people on the ground that know the cultural habits. We are working together with them, setting up the systems, and finding that cooperation there we find very, very useful. In Kibera, you can try to sell 10 stoves in Kibera without cooperating with one of the large organizations there. You will probably not succeed. But we get sort of an approval from them, and they know what's important, how to do things. So they're setting up the whole thing. And it saves us, of course, a lot of money, because we don't have to set it up ourselves. Bioethanol. We are coordinating all the sourcing of the ethanol. The ethanol production is a challenge, I would say, to make it sustainable. In the carbon credit program, we have established the UN guidelines for sustainable ethanol production, so that it doesn't conflict with this food security situation and making ethanol from waste material like molasses, from sugar production, like fruit waste from huge ananas and corn plants, and so forth. And in the longer run, I believe we'll be looking into the micro distilleries as well as a tool to create value locally. That's in a little bit longer term. Yeah, that's some of the projects I mentioned. We have financed quite a few stoves, and we have developed cooperations with local NGOs, companies, organizations. We have a goal of 1 million e-cookers, ethanol cookers, on the ground within 2018, distributing 1 million liters of ethanol each day. And we have a goal of setting up the production of the Safi e-cooker in Africa by 2015. We will start producing it in China, as that's sort of the easy way. The tools and the machinery is a lot cheaper to a company with limited investment possibilities. But Africa is the final target for the production. Yeah, that was a short run through of what we're thinking and how we're thinking. Any questions? Yep.
How easy is it to get bioethanol in Africa?
There's quite many producers. Also, the sugar production in Africa is quite large, and based on the molasses, quite many are making the ethanol.
You can buy it in the store, or you
No, you don't buy it in the store. So we are setting up the production, the distribution of the ethanol.
Okay.
Targeted for this project, and that's where we're making the money. We're not making any money on the stove. Okay.
Thank you very much. We have you can remain there in case there are a few other.
There's one there.
Yep, a few other questions, and we can expand the question around to everyone who's been speaking after the break.
Yeah, thanks. No, thank you. This is interesting and nicely upbeat. A lot of speakers today from civil society, from government, talking about the coalitions and the consultative process between private sector, civil society, local communities. You are private sector. You seem to have a good business idea. You're going ahead with this. How do you see this consultative process? How do you see that the existing ideas and knowledge, experience is being used to inform the policies like Energy Plus?
I think that a lot of the research that the NGOs are doing is very valuable. They have tested out this model, the World Bank together with Practical Action. That's very valuable. They've run the pilot project, so we know that it's working. They have the guidelines. So that part of it, I think, is very good. When it comes to the larger programs, some of them have been here up to date, like Energy Plus. We are sort of, and all the sort of the bistands money sent from Norway, we are more skeptical. We think that a lot of that is going into capacity building, all these nice words, not necessarily resulting in enough speed on the ground. I think they should be much more open to see that the only way forward for developing the underdeveloped nations is working together with business, and they don't do it on a general basis. You have to be an NGO.
Good.
Christian? I think we have deliberately chosen a business model where we don't have the business model. So that's much of how we would like to stay under the radar of the position that we don't want to be as little as possible to be involved in the big consultative processes. Because that's, yeah, it's often due to corruption, it leads to delays, and it's much easier to find business models that we connect directions and directly without having to participate in the, in all the societal transformations.
We follow the exact same principle. We stay under the radar for most of our business. That's the only way sort of to move fast.
Ben?
Yeah, just
Sorry, do we have a microphone here?
So there, okay.
thanks. I guess I'm the three on the NGO, right? Definitely IID is an organisation that very much promotes business in part of solution delivery. And I think that the task in terms of energy service delivery for the poor is so huge that there's space for many different types of business. I think sometimes there's with various presentations, and of course particular companies will push their own products as the product. There's space for all of these products. And going back to what I was saying within my presentation on appropriateness, you might see that the ethanol stove is very appropriate in a particular circumstance, but one place where I kind of felt that argument fell down was the supply of bioethanol. If it's cheaper than charcoal in rural areas, a lot of people gather their own wood, right? But then there's an opportunity cost there because that's very time consuming, and particularly for women. So that would then lead into those social cultural factors around that. The stove that you mentioned with the nifty add-on for charging a phone or whatever, in particular circumstances that might be extremely useful if the types of electricity services people need for their end user needs are met by that. Now if it's not affordable, then potentially that's a place for a targeted subsidy if it's sustainable. But it's also understandable from a business perspective how getting involved in that sort of subsidy trail is difficult because sometimes it's slow, donors are slow, governments are slow, etc. So I think there's a need for a lot more sort of working together, moving with speed, and looking at where solutions work the best. I do think one area where business finds it hard to deliver, most of these products are targeted at individual households or people. It is more difficult to deliver at the sort of communal goods level. It happens and businesses get involved, but there's probably more of a case for some support from a civil society or NGO type organisation for models where you see things like communal cooking facilities, which then allow the very poorest to use them.
We are approaching the end. Any final question? If not, I have a very short one. And that's how much of the cost is covered by through the carbon finance?
Well, that all depends on the price of carbon financing. With the current pricing we get for the carbon finance, we get covered the cost many times. So if we are at this level, we are doing very fine. So that all depends. The carbon credit price for this kind of projects is above $5 at the moment in the market and higher, and we can survive down to even $1 because we are replacing charcoal and getting a lot of carbon credits for this because it's totally clean. It's just not improving something. So carbon finance is a very important part of our business model. Although everyone says take it out because we can't talk about it because it's so unsure, we have secured our business with the carbon credits and will use that as a very important tool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next time it will be your big skills
I hope so.
supporting here.
I hope so.
Thank you very much to all the speakers, Terje, Ben, Ole, and Christian. We forgotten a couple of flowers, I think, but it will be sorted. And I think it's been very interesting, sort of bringing together the top down with the bottom up, and looking at the role of business in making progress on this. So thank you everyone for coming. We'll see you again sometime.
Yes. God seanse. En god blanding av
Ja, det var det.
presentasjoner.
Så, bra.